You know, the only two people that were quite disappointed, I don't want to say this, but I have to. I said, Pete and General Caine, I think this thing's going to be settled very soon. Here they go. Oh, that's too bad. Pete didn't want it to be settled. It's these guys are doing a great job. That's a good attitude, though, Tom, right? They were not interested in settlement. They were interested in just winning this thing.
All right, so our Defense Department is being run by an actual clown who doesn't know what he's doing. And yesterday, Trump threw the Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth under the bus, stating that he's the reason that we're still in this war. According to Trump, Hegseth and General Caine weren't too happy about the US's 15-point plan to end the war. They said, you know what, we want more war. It's very sad that we're trying to end this now. So the New York Times has not seen a copy of the plan, but the officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive details, shared some of its broad outlines, saying that it addressed Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear programs. The plan also discusses maritime routes, one official said. Since the beginning of the war, Iran has effectively blocked most Western ships from safely passing through the Strait of Hormuz, the strategic waterway in and out of the Persian Gulf, cutting the global supply of oil and natural gas and sending prices soaring. Iran has responded basically saying the war will end on their terms, not on Trump's. And at the end of the day, Hegseth doesn't want this war to end because he gets to show off what a strong, strong man he is. Let's watch.
The air campaign that we've conducted, that Israel's conducted alongside us, was one for the history books, truly. And it's because we have a president of the United States that when he sends his war fighters out to fight, he unties their hands to actually go out and close with and destroy the enemy as viciously as possible from moment one. And that's why we see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs. You have a choice as we loiter over the top of Tehran, as the president talked about your future. The president has made it clear that you will not have a nuclear weapon. The War Department agrees. Our job is to ensure that. And so we're keeping our hand on that throttle as long as hard as is necessary to ensure the interests of the United States of America are achieved on that battlefield.
Why is he smiling as he's saying all of this? This man is crazy. And as a reminder, yet again, Iran was never an immediate threat to the United States. And we're only in this war because of Israel, whether or not the mainstream media wants to talk about that, that is why we're there. An unnecessary war that we are now a part of. And it's like all of this has led to the death now of at least 13 US service members. And we have this man at the head of everything who is giddy over, what did he say? Operating as viciously as possible. Is he a child, Wise? Like he sounds like a little boy.
No, but their hands are no longer tied. They could be as vicious as possible to drop, bombs on the heads of school children and kill damn near 200 schoolgirls. That's what Pete Hegseth is bragging about. Their ability to be unrestrained in the violence that they unleash out in the Middle East. It's so stupid, and obviously it's ghoulish and vicious. And these people, I mean, it's hard to take any of this stuff serious because the bluster is so cartoonish and buffoonish. Like it's hard to even be mad. Like you look like a clown. Nobody actually watches this guy talk, thinks, wow, like we really got our head in the game and our eyes on the ball. And again, for people to understand, the fact that the United States is even talking about a surrender, or excuse me, a cessation of hostilities, it just shows that we're not winning. All of we're gonna obliterate the nuclear energy. We're gonna decapitate the regime and do regime change. We're gonna open up the Strait of Hormuz. We're reaching none of those objectives, nothing. So if we were winning, we'd be pressing our advantages and be like, screw that. We're putting a brand new puppet regime in. Guys, they're gonna love America and love Israel. They're gonna be our little lackeys over there in Iran. We're gonna keep doing what we're doing. We're gonna take over Iran's oil. We're gonna open up the strait. Why would we stop if we were that close to achieving those objectives? The answer is we're not. We're not winning. We're not.
No.
We're doing a lot of destruction. Our military is very good at that. $1 trillion, we can do a lot of indiscriminate or even targeted destruction to buildings and facilities and all of that stuff. But again, Iran has been preparing for 25 years for this. Okay.
Yeah, no.
And so they know what our capabilities are. Yeah, it's like they know, like, all right, they're gonna bomb this. They're gonna bomb the hell out of that. Oh, okay, they think they're gonna invade. All right, we know exactly where they're gonna try to invade from. Oh, they're gonna try to attack us from places like, Kuwait and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Oh, we'll bomb the hell out of their infrastructure. Oh, we'll decimate their oil economy if they keep playing with us. We'll make their lives miserable. We'll turn Dubai into the freaking 4th of July and thereby ruin their freaking tourist economy so they can start putting pressure on the US. Like, they've thought about this stuff. And us, we got Pete Hegseth, the biggest meathead doofus I've ever seen in my life. And the American people are supposed to believe we're quote unquote winning this war.
Yeah, that is really a very accurate description of Pete Hegseth. Just like a meathead doofus, just like a dude who never matured past the 8th grade. Like, I remember kids acting exactly this way in literally the 8th grade. And at the time, as another 8th grader, I was like, those are bad, dumb kids. Like, that's who we have running our country right now. But you know what? Hegseth's incompetent as the DOD secretary or DOW secretary, whatever he wants to be called, isn't just evident in his actions in Iran, but it's also evident by his charge on narco terrorism. We've reported extensively on the unnecessary strikes Hegseth led, the charge on drug boats in the Caribbean. But earlier this month, US officials released this video so you can see what's going on down there. So this is showing the destruction of what they stated as a drug trafficking group's training camp in rural Ecuador. That's what they said this was, and you can see them blowing it up. So a Pentagon spokesperson, Sean Parnell, uploaded the video to X on March 6th, writing at the time, he said, under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, the department is uniting partners across the Western Hemisphere to detect, disrupt, and destroy designated terrorist organizations that fuel violence and corruption. We commend President Noboa, the government of Ecuador, and the brave troops of Ecuador's defense and security forces for their partnership in the successful operation against a narco-terrorist supply complex today, disrupting their operations and logistics. And at the request of Ecuador, the Department of War executed targeted action to advance our shared objective of dismantling narco-terrorist networks. This operation demonstrates the power of coordinated action and sends a clear message: narco-terrorist networks will not find refuge in our hemisphere, in the entire hemisphere. Okay. And the US, by the way, believes that it owns and operates and just manages the entire Western Hemisphere. And it was subsequently quote tweeted by Hegseth himself. And he said, yes, as POTUS has said, we are bombing narco terrorists on land as well. Thank you to our partners in Ecuador, much more to come. Yeah, it's an allusion to the fact that they were blowing up drug boats in the Caribbean, even though they never found any drugs there. And then they used that as an excuse to invade Venezuela. I know it happened fairly recently, but it feels like such a long time ago, doesn't it? Because a lot has happened since then. But here's the thing, it wasn't a drug trafficking compound at all that they bombed. It was actually a cattle and dairy farm. So according to a report from the New York Times, workers on the farm told the Times that Ecuadorian soldiers arrived by helicopter on March 3rd, doused several shelters and sheds with gasoline and ignited them after interrogating workers and beating 4 of them with the butts of their guns. 3 of the workers who requested anonymity for fear of retaliation by the government said the soldiers later choked and subjected them to electrical shocks before letting them go. Village residents said Ecuadorian helicopters returned to the farm 3 days later on March 6th and appeared to drop explosives on the farm's smoldering remains. It was at that point, they said, that Ecuadorian soldiers recorded the footage that US and Ecuadorian officials said captured the bombing of the traffickers' compound. So the New York Times does state that although the Pentagon stated they executed targeted action, that's a quote, at the request of Ecuador, those familiar with the operation said US troops had no direct involvement in the strike on the farm. However, 2 US officials who requested anonymity to speak about the operation said US Special Forces had provided guidance to the Ecuadorians in a raid on 2 abandoned homes upriver. One of the officials added that the US military deployed a helicopter to assist Ecuador's strike on the farm, but that the US military had no direct involvement in the bombing. The Ecuadorian government said in the news release that it had relied on US intelligence and support to target the farm, which it said was a camp used to train, quote, about 50 drug traffickers. And adding, Ecuadorian officials also said it was a resting place used by the leader of Comandos de la Frontera, a Colombian armed group that moves cocaine along the Ecuador-Colombia border, according to authorities. But, as I'm sure you can guess, no evidence of any of that has been released. And according to residents, the farm and other homes targeted were not linked to any kind of illicit activity prior to the strike. And Miguel, who bought the farm 6 years ago, stood in the rubble, and he was telling the New York Times that this is an outrage. It's a lie that 50 people trained here. Where are they going to train? Out here in the open, there's no logic. Everywhere you look, there are animals, the cows I milk, the calves, the horses. And he's a dairy and cattle farm owner. And the only thing that Pete Hegseth is good at in this role is lying. I don't know if he did all of this just as like a really big propaganda operation was, but he's going after innocent civilians. These people are not looking for a fight. These people are not even trying to get involved in the drug trade. All the trafficking that happens between Ecuador and Colombia, that is something that does need to be dealt with. More so, especially for the people of Ecuador who just want to live their lives. This man was a dairy farmer and he was attacked by the American and Ecuadorian government. What is happening? And this is just the latest in Trump's onslaught of the rest of the world.
I mean, folks just need to sit and think about this for a second. After months of these guys allegedly bombing drug boats, right, in the middle of the Caribbean Ocean, sea, now these guys bomb the hell out of what they call a drug manufacturing property, and it's literally a milk farm. Literally, they were making milk over there. That's what they were doing. They were producing milk. That's like, guys, it's almost as if the entire sort of reason for being of these operations was just lies. And all it felt like to me is just more intimidation. It's just more bullying tactics to our neighbors in the hemisphere to be like, oh, we're the big dogs on the block, and you guys need to do everything and anything we ever say, or else, right? This is the kind of stuff that we're gonna do, and just know that this was all crap from the beginning. So all of those boats they shot down, man. I mean, even at the time, the reporting was these are boats that, without refueling, can't even get to places like Miami. Okay, like these are boats that could only go pretty short distances from South America. These drugs were never coming here. And second, if you were so good at identifying drug boats, we got a US Coast Guard. We could just stop these boats. We have ATF, DEA. We have the Ecuadorian military. Why can't y'all do a raid? Seize these people, arrest them, take them to court, like we always do for drug criminals. And by the way, folks, don't get it twisted, man. When they use the term narco terrorist, it's just degrading the very meaning of a terrorist. Like, it just literally doesn't mean anything. I think back in the days with like Pablo Escobar and the Cali cartel, where they're like bombing civilian airplanes because lawyers and like politicians that they don't like are on those planes. You can credibly say these guys are narco traffickers who commit acts of terrorism. Where are the terroristic acts of these alleged traffickers? Like, they don't even bother to try to explain it to us. The contempt that they have for us, they think we're so stupid and just out to lunch. It's incredible, Yaz.
I mean, it is reassuring that they're pulling a lot of the same tricks that they pulled back in 2001, in the early 2000s after 9/11, and they're simply not working as well as they did the last time. It's crazy that they're still trying the same thing over and over again, but I am comforted by the fact that more people are just like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's weird that you're talking this way. It's weird that you're saying all these things are happening, but you can't give us any kind of evidence. And to be fair, back in 2003, right, as we were about to invade Iraq, people were asking, like, do you have proof of these weapons of mass destruction? And they were like, it's kind of there. I've seen it, I promise, right? And that was enough. They did what they had to do. And they're trying to do that again. But this time, the American people are pushing back more than they were before. But yeah, we've seen them do this exact same thing just earlier this year. So they were just trying to repeat something. And it didn't go well for them the first time. But they still, even with all this opposition, they still continued to attack fishermen in the Caribbean Sea. And they still invaded Venezuela, took all their oil and gave it to Israel. So this administration is just going to do whatever they want to do. Which is all the more reason why we have to keep fighting vocally back against them.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.